ओम परतत्वे सदा लीनो रामकृष्णसमाज्ञया यो धर्मस्थापनरतो वीरेशं तं नमाम्यहम्. We have been studying Swami Vivekananda's Karma Yoga, and the first chapter was Karma in its effect and character, and in second chapter which we are reading is named as Each is great in his own place. And from this name we have understood that we need not change our work. We have to change the attitude behind the work. And our work, what work we should do, is determined by our position in society and our position in life. Because this idea of Karma Yoga came from India, and there Varnashrama Dharma is preached. But Swamiji is preaching this to the whole world because it is useful for any sadhak anywhere in the world. And therefore, he has broadened the outlook. So, taking the spirit of that idea of Varnashram, he has told us that what is your position in which country where you are and what work you are doing. So we may sum up this idea by telling the circumstances in which you are placed. That determines all the varnas. And the second idea is about ashramas, that what stage of life you are in. Depending upon this, your duty or the work you should do is determined. And you need not change that, thinking that others' work is better. You need not change it. You have to change the attitude behind the work. Now, we were reading the work or duties given to the householder according to Mahanirvan Tantra. But let us go back a few pages, and I want to read out a few lines from a few pages back. You may find the para, the life of every individual according to the Hindu scriptures has its peculiar duties apart from what belongs to common to universal humanity. The Hindu begins life as a student, then he marries and becomes a householder. In old age he retires, and lastly he gives up the world and becomes a sannyasi. To each of these stages of life certain duties are attached. No one of these stages is intrinsically superior to another. The life of the married man is quite as great as that of the celibate who has devoted himself to religious work. The scavenger in the street is quite as great and glorious as the king on his throne. Take him off his throne, make him do the work of the scavenger and see how he fares. Take up the scavenger and see how he will rule. It is useless to say that the man who lives out of the world is a greater man than he who lives in the world. It is much more difficult to live in the world and worship God than to give it up and live a free and easy life. Now, I wanted to read from this paragraph, this line, because it is in between a paragraph. To give you an idea, I started from the paragraph. The 4 stages of life in India have in later times been reduced to 2, that of the householder and of the monk. What is the meaning of these later times? Now you will find very, very, very rare people in India even today who go through these 4 stages. That means he studies, then becomes a householder, then retires to forest, then becomes a sannyasi. You will find even today, but almost negligible. What has become the pattern? 2 orders he tells. That is, student life is taken only as the beginning life. And there we learn not only education, but lot of morality, lot of right conduct we learn. So that is taken as the preliminary. And then he becomes either a married and becomes a householder, then till the end of the life he is an householder. Or at that very point he becomes a sannyasi. And till the end of his life he is a sannyasi then. So these have become the two different ideas. That is what Swamiji has told us. And that is what we see in the world. Swamiji is preaching it throughout the world. So that from these two ideas we have to learn throughout the world. And here Swamiji is telling the householder marries and carries on his duties as a citizen, and the duty of the other is to devote his energies wholly to religion, to preach and to worship God. And he has already told in this very paragraph that in this we should not compare who is greater. And he has told not only to become a householder, what we read in the beginning of the para, the life of the married man is quite as great as that of the celibate. No, this will come later on. Where it is? That is, to live as a householder and keep the ideal intact. The ideal, in the beginning he will tell that ideal is devoted to God and knowledge of God should be the goal of life. Such a life living in a householder is really difficult. And on the other hand, the sannyasin, he has of course renounced lust and gold, but because he is devoting his whole life to God, it is not that difficult. That is what he means. So we need not change, we need not compare. Whatever may be our constitution, let us follow. And now, certain things which can be universally applicable in the householder, that is what he has started. And that he has taken, other than Gita, from the Mahanirvana Tantra, and is reading passage after passage and commenting on it. That is where we are. So now we go to the place where we studied up to last time. And the new paragraph starts like this. He must struggle to acquire a good name by all means. Householder. Good name means not by purchasing, achieving. If he does everything good, he will be called good. So the idea is not only acquire a good name, but be good. He must not gamble. He must not move in the company of the wicked. He must not tell lies and must not be the cause of trouble to others. Now next para seems to be Swamiji's comment on this. Often people enter into things they have not the means to accomplish, with the result that they cheat others to attain their own ends. Thus there is in all things the time factor to be taken into consideration. What at one time might be a failure would perhaps at another time be a very great success. So this is also a factor to be taken into consideration. The householder must speak the truth and speak gently, using words which people like, which will do good to others, nor should he talk of the business of other men. Now, this is from Mahanirvana Tantra. There is a similar shloka in the Gita that if a man speaks, 4 things he should observe, all 4. Here we find four. One is little different than the Gita. Anudvega karam vakyam, Gita I am telling. Anudvega karam vakyam, satyam priya hitam chayat. In the 17th chapter, while discussing tapasya, we had quoted this. Anudvega karam vakyam. Some sentence should not irritate the others, should not produce excitation in others. Satyam, it should be true. Priyam, but it should be told in a pleasing way. We should not speak untruth to please others. We have to speak the truth, but in a pleasing way. And main thing was told was hitam. Whether that will be beneficial to him or beneficial to you, that is the main consideration. Otherwise, why you are talking? Gossiping leads the mind astray. Gossiping purposelessly is taken as a great evil in spiritual life. It distracts the mind like anything. Suppose people are gossiping. After half an hour you ask them from where you started, they will not be able to tell you. So they go on digressing anywhere. So while speaking you have to consider where it is beneficial to him or to you or to both. Otherwise why speak? So this Swamiji is telling from Nama Nirvana Tantra, the householder must speak the truth and speak gently, using words which people like, which will do good to others. This good to others is what is the main thing. Another thing is added here, nor should he talk of the business of other men. So, this again becomes irrelevant talk and digresses the mind. The householder, by digging tanks, by planting trees on the roadside, by establishing rest houses for men and animals, by making roads and building bridges, goes towards the same goal as the greatest yogi. Why Mahanirvana Tantra is telling like this? You need not go to forest and take up the sannyasi's life. You do your work properly, but not only speaking, works which are beneficial to others. Unselfishness is the most important thing in Karma Yoga. Most important thing. Unselfish work will be the most important thing in Karma Yoga. So, these are the different ideas given to do the unselfish work, useful to the society. This is one part of the doctrine of Karma Yoga, activity, the duty of the householder. Karma Yoga is mainly meant for the householder. Let me tell you here that life has become two parts, sannyasi or householder. This sannyasi is not the sannyasi mentioned in the Gita. Sannyasi mentioned in the Gita is one who has gone beyond the idea that I am the doer. We have not gone beyond that idea. Where sannyasi means we have given up lust and gold. But we are active. And as we are active, the same rules which apply to the householder applies to the sannyasis also. In Mahanirvana Tantra time that was not so. So, here Swamiji is giving us the idea that see the situation in which you are, see the constitution of your mind, see the level to which the mind has risen, and then do the work. So, activity, the duty of the householder. Now, as soon as I will tell you some more things. As soon as there is a common kitchen, we are incurring 4 sins, the scriptures tell us. Grinding, some deaths occur. Small microbes, insects, worms, they go. Sweeping, something goes. special, something goes. Cooking, something goes. So, cutting vegetables, something goes. And for that, the householder has to do panchayajna. 5 sacrifices, 5 types of sacrifices every day. He must worship the gods. He must honor the guests. He must do something for the birds. He must study scriptures. So these 5 things become essential. Now many of these things apply to present day sannyasis also. One of our great Swamis, Swami Niramayanandaji, used to use one name to ourselves. He used to say we have become establishmentarians. The old idea of a sannyasi is that he walks. He does not have a home of his own. But we now have establishments. Why? Because we want to do work, and work cannot be done single-handedly. Work has to be done together. And so, as we adopted the path of work as our sadhana, we have become establishmentarians. And so certain rules follow. This is the important idea. There is a passage later on where it says that if the householder dies in battle, fighting for his country or his religion, he comes to the same goal as the yogi by meditation. That is again for the Kshatriya. I gave you an example about the Horatius. So the Kshatriya, his dharma is fight for the righteous cause, not fight for fight's sake. And for fighting for the righteous cause, if he dies in the battle, then he has done his duty. He has elevated his consciousness. So, according to the state of life, according to the situation you are, the duties are prescribed. And so he says, you need not become a yogi and meditate. In this respect, I will tell you an incident. I don't remember whether I shared it with you or in some class. Outskirts of Pune, or part of Pune, I do not know, there is a place, and their military cantonment is there. And I stayed there for 2-3 days. I visited a family. Both were great devotees. The man was a military man, and he had joined many Antarctic expeditions and so many things he had done from military. And his wife. Both were religious. But the man had a doubt. His form of religious practice was differing from his wife's practice. So, are we both correct? Or am I wrong, or is she wrong? He asked me the question. Now, military people have a privilege in India also. They have special temples for them, and they enter with shoes, boots also. Now, this man is not going to temple. In his house, he says, my wife does everything required for me. I have no complaint. But she does, other times, whole day she only does worship. I cannot do like that. When I am about to go to the military, I put on my uniform, put on my shoes, and my wife is doing puja. I stand behind her, and for 5 minutes I pray. And then I go to the military. When I come back, I find my wife is at puja. So I stand behind her, pray for 5 minutes, then my wife does everything required for me. Now tell me, who is right and who is wrong? I said, if you had not done that 5 minutes, then I would have told you are wrong. If your wife had not attended yours, I would have told she is wrong. But in this respect, when on her way to the military, should she spend her time in gossiping with neighbors? Should she spend her time in useless activities? She worships all day. That is her religion. And you are mainly busy in the military. You cannot worship there. But 5 minutes, you think of God. Coming back to think of God. That is your religion. So both are doing correctly. Swamiji is telling each is great in his own place. So he is comparing an householder and a sannyasi, but I compared a husband and a wife. Another story I remember. In Chandigarh, outskirts of Chandigarh, Panchkula, there was an industrialist, small-scale industrialist. He also said the same thing. My wife, all day she is busy in religion. What I do, when I go to the factory, I stand in the door of my house and pray to God and tell God that I am going to your factory. And when I finish my work and come back to the house, I again pray and tell God I have come back from your factory. You tell me, should I do something more? I said, I can suggest one more thing. In your factory, you have some pause. You are not continuously busy in work. When there is a pause, can you think, oh God, I am sitting in your factory? Then it is enough. Then next year what happened? He asked me another question. These factories or any enterprises have a tendency to grow. Whether you grow it or not is not the question. They have a tendency to grow. How far a growth should be allowed by a religious man? Then I told him, I remember what you told me last year. If the growth hampers this idea of yours, then that growth should not be allowed. If you are feeling that it is God's factory, you are working there, and you feel it morning and evening, the factory should not grow to such an extent that you forget this. Otherwise, if the factory grows, what harm is there? So long as you keep constant on this. So these are the various ideas. And that is what Swamiji is telling. Now that sentence comes, which I was searching. Showing thereby that what is duty for one is not duty for another. At the same time, it does not say that this duty is lowering and the other elevating. Each duty has its own place, and according to the circumstances in which we are placed, must we perform our duties. So all Varnashrama Dharma, Swamiji sums up in this, according to the circumstances in which we are placed, must we perform our duties. One idea comes out of all this, the condemnation of all weakness. This is a particular idea in all our teachings which I like. Our teachings means Hindu teachings or Indian teachings. Either in philosophy or in religion or in work. If you read the Vedas, you will find this word always repeated, fearlessness, fear nothing. I can share here one thing. In the Sikh, of course, they are not outside Hinduism, but in the Sikh parlance, in the first verse, it is mentioned that God is fearless. एक ओंकार सतनाम कर्ता पुरुष निर्भव निर्वैरु, fearless. So that is what the idea Swamiji likes. Fear is a sign of weakness. A man must go about his duties without taking notice of the sneers and the ridicule of the world. Now this is becoming more and more relevant today. Today, if you are a sincere sadhak, the world sneers at you and ridicules you. But you should not feel disturbed. If you are strong enough, if you are fearless enough, you must do your sadhana, your duty, righteous way, thinking of God, towards God. If a man retires from the world to worship God, he must not think that those who live in the world and work for the good of the world are not worshipping God. So only it is not a question of householder. Being a householder, if you are working for the good of the world, then it is good. Then it is worshipping God. Neither must those who live in the world for wife and children. Why you are living in the world? For wife and children. So, you should not think that sannyasi is a vagabond. You understand the point? One must see the smallness of our thing and greatness of others. Householder says, I am doing my duty, you are not doing any duty. Why you are doing duty? Because you have wife and children. Sannyasi has no such thing. And if the householder is doing good for others, then sannyasi is for his own spiritual elevation. He should not say you are bad. So seeing the good points in others, good point means they are going towards God in their own way. That is the whole point. Swamiji has given one beautiful illustration that I remember here. He says, our life is like a line. In that line there is one lighted spot somewhere, others are dark. Other man is also in line. Light somewhere, dark in other places. We see the darkness of that man and criticize him. We do not see there is a light. He sees there is darkness in me, he does not see the light. That should not be the attitude. We should see the light in his life, he should see light in me. Jesus, of course, has told in a still higher way, say you are trying to take out a small mole from the eyes of the other man, but there is a beam in your eyes that you see first. If you remove your beam, you can clearly see the mole in his eyes. Anyway, neither must those who live in the world for wife and children think that those who give up the world are low vagabonds. Each is great in his own place. This thought I will illustrate by a story. So, Swamiji has picked up a story, most probably from Mahabharata. Now let us read the story. A certain king used to inquire of all the sannyasin that came to his country, which is the greater man, he who gives up the world and becomes a sannyasin, or he who lives in the world and performs his duties as a householder? Some joke was coming to my mind, so I stopped. Householder means you hold on to your house. Grihastha means you stay in your house. But the Indian name was Grihasthashrami. He is a different man. Ashrama means a place. By taking resort to it, you are fighting for your ideal. That is the idea of an ashrama. My Guruji taught me this. We are in Ramakrishna Ashrama. That means taking Ramakrishna as our model, we are trying to achieve the goal of life. Brahmacharya Ashrama, Grihastha Ashrama, Sannyas Ashrama. So, Grihastha means staying in a house. Householder holding the house. That is not sufficient. We have to struggle to reach the goal of life, taking resort to living in a house or whatever it is. Many wise men sought to solve the problem. Some asserted that the sannyasin was the greater, upon which the king demanded that they should prove their assertion. When they could not, he ordered them to marry and become householders. Then others came and said, the householder who performs his duties is the greater man. Of them too the king demanded proofs. When they could not give them, he made them also settle down as householders. At last there came a young sannyasin, and the king similarly inquired of him also. He answered, each, O king, is equally great in his own place. Prove this to me, asked the king. I will prove it to you, said the sannyasin, but you must first come and live as I do for a few days, that I may be able to prove it to you, what I say. Theoretically, what is the use of proving? The king consented and followed the sannyasin, and out of his own territory and passed through many other countries until they came to a great kingdom. In the capital of that kingdom, a great ceremony was going on. The king and the sannyasin heard the noise of drums and music and heard also the criers. Criers means those who announce things. That was the old Indian idea. We did not have TV advertisements. The people were assembled in the streets in gala dress, and a great proclamation was being made. The king and the sannyasin stood there to see what was going on. The crier was proclaiming loudly that the princess, daughter of the king of that country, was about to choose a husband from among those assembled before her. Swamiji is trying to explain this now to the Western audience, even to the Indian present audience. It was an old custom in India for princesses to choose husbands in this way. Each princess had certain ideas of the sort of man she wanted for a husband. She is not marrying for a man, she is marrying ideas. Some would have the handsomest man, others would have only the most learned, others again the richest, and so on. All the princes of the neighborhood put on their bravest attire and presented themselves before her. Sometimes they too had their own criers to enumerate their advantages and the reason why they hoped the princess would choose them. The princess was taken round on a throne in the most splendid array and looked at and heard about them. If she was not pleased with what she saw and heard, she said to her bearers, move on. And no more notice was taken of the rejected suitors. If, however, the princess was pleased with any one of them, she threw a garland of flowers over him and he became her husband. The princess of the country to which our king and the sannyasin had come was having one of these interesting ceremonies. She was the most beautiful princess in the world, and the husband of the princess would be ruler of the kingdom after her father's death. The idea of this princess was to marry the handsomest man, but she could not find the right one to please her. Several times these meetings had taken place, but the princess could not select a husband. This meeting was the most splendid of all. More people than ever had come to it. The princess came in on a throne, and the bearers carried her from place to place. She did not seem to care for anyone, and everyone became disappointed that this meeting also was going to be a failure. Just then came a young man, a sannyasin, other than the sannyasin and the king, handsome as if the sun had come down to the earth, and stood in one corner of the assembly watching what was going on. He might not have perhaps seen such a thing. The throne with the princess came near him, and as soon as she saw the beautiful sannyasin, she stopped and threw the garland over him. The young sannyasin, seized the garland and threw it off, exclaiming, "What nonsense is this? I am a sannyasi. What is marriage to me?" The king of that country thought that perhaps this man was poor, and so dared not marry the princess, and said to him, "With my daughter goes half my kingdom now, and the whole kingdom after my death," and put the garland again on the sannyasi. The young man threw it off once more, saying, "Nonsense, I do not want to marry," and walked quickly away from the assembly. Now the princess had fallen so much in love with this young man that she said, "I must marry this man or I shall die." And she went after him to bring him back. Then our other sannyasin who had brought the king there said to him, "King, let us follow this pair." So they walked after them, but at a good distance behind. The young sannyasin who had refused to marry the princess walked out into the country for several miles. When he came to a forest and entered into it, the princess followed him, and the other two followed them. Now this young sannyasin was well acquainted with that forest, and knew all the intricate paths in it. He suddenly passed into one of these and disappeared, and the princess could not discover him. After trying for a long time to find him, she sat down under a tree and began to weep, for she did not know the way out. That became her first concern now. Then our king and the other sannyasin came up to her and said, "Do not weep. We will show you the way out of this forest. But it is too dark for us to find it now. Here is a big tree. Let us rest under it, and in the morning we will go early and show you the road." Now a little bird and his wife and their 3 little ones lived on that tree in a nest. This little bird looked down and saw the 3 people under the tree and said to his wife, "My dear, what shall we do? Here are some guests in the house, and it is winter and we have no fire." So he flew away and got a bit of burning firewood in his beak and dropped it before the guests, to which they added fuel and made a blazing fire. But the little bird was not satisfied. He said again to his wife, "My dear, what shall we do? There is nothing to give these people to eat, and they are hungry. We are householders. It is our duty to feed anyone who comes to the house. I must do what I can. I will give them my body." So he plunged into the midst of the fire and perished. The guests saw him falling and tried to save him, but he was too quick for them. The little bird's wife saw what her husband did, and she said, "Here are 3 persons and only 1 little bird for them to eat. It is not enough. It is my duty as a wife not to let my husband's efforts go in vain. Let them have my body also." Then she fell into the fire and was burned to death. Then the 3 baby birds, when they saw what was done and that there was still not enough food for the 3 guests, said, "Our parents have done what they could, and still it is not enough. It is our duty to carry on the work of our parents. Let our bodies go too." And they all dashed down into the fire also. Amazed at what they saw, the 3 people could not, of course, eat these birds. They passed the night without food, and in the morning the king and the sannyasin showed the princess the way, and she went back to her father. Then the sannyasin said to the king, "King, you have seen that each is great in his own place. If you want to live in the world, live like those birds, ready at any moment to sacrifice yourself for others." Though he has given the story of the birds, you may think that is it possible for man? There are many stories in Mahabharata about this, Raja Rantidev and whatnot. But in our own times, in practical life, we know Dr. Durgacharan Nag, who was called Nag Mahashay, a great devotee of Sri Ramakrishna and householder. He never cared for his own food or life. and some guests came to him. There was no firewood to cook the meals. His house was made of wood, and he took a saw and started cutting the roof of the house so that he will use the firewood to cook for the guests. So we should not say it is impossible, it is there. And in Raja Rantidev and some other cases, Swamiji also has given that story in another place, that there was a drought and there was no food. Somehow a family of 4, they got some barley and they made 4 parts of food for them. And then the Chandala and the guests came to their house along with their dogs and said, "We are hungry." Then the man gave his food. He said, "It has increased my hunger." The wife gave, the son gave, the son's wife gave, and they all died. And yet there was a mongoose, that story will come here. When it rolled on the few particles lying, it became golden. Another story of Raja Rantideva, similar story, but the end is different. When they were about to die, then the scene changed. The gods had come to examine them. And then the gods revealed their own nature and asked Raja, "What do you ask from us?" Raja said, "I don't want anything." They said, "Please ask something." Then he said, "Can you make such arrangement that I will suffer for the entire universe? Nobody else other than me should suffer." Such are the heroes. If you want to live in the world, live like those birds, ready at any moment to sacrifice yourself for others. If you want to renounce the world, be like that young man to whom the most beautiful woman and a kingdom were as nothing. If you want to be a householder, hold your life as sacrifice for the welfare of others. So simply becoming a householder is not the solution. And if you choose the life of renunciation, do not even look at beauty and money and power. Each is great in his own place, but the duty of the one is not the duty of the other. So, this Swamiji has proved by a fable, by an example. Now, we come to the next chapter. The secret of work. In this chapter, there are 2 different ideas. Both can be called the secret of work. The first idea is, as we have learnt up till now, we have to help others. Now, which help is greater, which is smaller, that is the first point discussed here. And the second point, the secret of work, is that how we can work without attachment. These are the 2 points being discussed here. And I find this attachment is not what normally we understand. We understand attachment to our families or money or these things. But here he is telling attachment to the work which you are doing. We must work, but without attachment to the work which you are doing. So, let us take up the first idea in the secret of work, helping others. That is how the chapter starts. What is the implication? As I was telling you, helping others is the principal part of any karma yoga. Helping others physically by removing their physical needs is indeed great. But the help is greater according as the need is greater, and according the help is far-reaching. Greater need and far-reaching means for how long that need is fulfilled by your work. Very important for all of us. If a man's wants can be removed for an hour, it is helping him indeed. If his wants can be removed for a year, it will be more help to him. But if his wants can be removed forever, it is surely the greatest help that can be given him. If you give some man some doles of food or some money, it will get exhausted quickly. But if you can find some work for him and pay accordingly, then his needs will be solved for a longer time. This is one thing to understand. Of course, Swamiji is telling some much higher things. Spiritual knowledge is the only thing that can destroy our miseries forever. Our miseries forever can be destroyed if we go beyond those miseries. And this is done only by spiritual knowledge. Any other knowledge satisfies wants only for a time, within knowledge. Secular knowledge also is important because mind should not blindly live in the world. It should with open eyes live in the world. So education of secular knowledge also is important, but according to Swamiji here, it has taken the second place. It is only with the knowledge of the spirit that the faculty of want is annihilated forever. Faculty of want, that means we have a, faculty is the best word for that. We have a tendency in us gives want. I want this, I want that, I want that. This is the basic part of our constitution. And suppose this is gone, I do not want anything. How it will go? By spiritual knowledge. By spiritual knowledge, if I reach God, if I become perfect, I do not want anything. So, that is the greatest help. Can we help like that? So, helping man spiritually is the highest help that can be given him. He who gives man spiritual knowledge is the greatest benefactor of mankind, and as such we always find that those were the most powerful of men who helped men in his spiritual needs. Because spirituality is the true basis of all our activities in life. If you are progressing spiritually, all your activities have meaning, not otherwise. A spiritually strong and sound man will be strong in every other respect, if he so wishes. Until there is spiritual strength in man, even physical needs cannot be well satisfied. Next to spiritual comes intellectual health. The gift of knowledge is a far higher gift than that of food and clothes. It is even higher than giving life to a man. Because the real life of man consists of knowledge. Ignorance is death, knowledge is life. Life is of very little value if it is a life in the dark, groping through ignorance and misery. Next in order comes, of course, helping a man physically, third stage. Therefore, in considering the question of helping others, we must always strive not to commit the mistake of thinking that physical help is the only help that can be given. It is not only the last but the least, because it cannot bring about permanent satisfaction. The misery that I feel when I am hungry is satisfied by eating, but hunger returns. My misery can cease only when I am satisfied beyond all want. Then hunger will not make me miserable. No distress, no sorrow will be able to move me. So that help which tends to make us strong spiritually is the highest. Next to it comes intellectual help, and after that physical help. He again puts it in a different language. The miseries of the world cannot be cured by physical help only, miseries of the world. Until man's nature changes, these physical needs will always arise, and miseries will always be felt, and no amount of physical help will cure them completely. The only solution of this problem is to make mankind pure. Mankind pure, then they will realize God, and then they will go beyond wants. Ignorance is the mother of all the evil and all the misery we see. Ignorance, not intellectual ignorance, ignorance of their own real nature, ignorance of the real nature of the world, ignorance about the nature of God. If this goes away by real experiential knowledge, then only the man goes beyond wants. Let men have light. Let them be pure and spiritually strong. This is the light. Not only physical darkness, physical light. Light of knowledge of God. And spiritually strong and educated, then alone will misery cease in the world, not before. We may convert every house in the country into a charity asylum. We may fill the land with hospitals, but the misery of man will still continue to exist until man's character changes. So this is the first point in this Swamiji's third chapter, Secret of Work. This is one part of the Secret of Work. Now Swamiji comes to the real topic of this chapter. I will just start. We read in the Bhagavad Gita again and again that we must all work incessantly because we cannot do without that. All work is very important thing Swamiji is telling now. All work is by nature composed of good and evil. All work is by nature composed of good and evil. We cannot do any work which will not do some good somewhere. There cannot be any work which will not cause some harm somewhere. I think this is an independent, important topic. We'll take it in the next class only, not now. So, to sum up today's talk, we need not change our work. We have to work according to our constitution, situation in which we are placed, stage of growth in our life, how to progress further, that should be the nature of work. That is the first lesson. Each is great in his own place. And the second lesson we have seen, if possible for us to give spiritual knowledge, we have to struggle ourselves. To give intellectual knowledge also, we have to be equipped properly. And to give physical help, food, medicine, money, saving life. This should not be the highest goal of life, but this also becomes essential because in India there is a saying, in Hindi, Bhuke bhajanana hoi gopala. A hungry man cannot worship God. So you have to feed him first, and then only we can give spiritual knowledge. So these are the lessons learned today. Now very important lessons await us, so we'll take it up in the next term. Om Paratatve Sada Lino Ramakrishna Samagyaya Yo Dharma Sthapana Rato Vire Shamtam Namamyam. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Tat Sat. Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.
Pranam Maharaj.
Yes.